Raya Mehemna, the faithful shepherd, in a time who was able to bring the Jewish people to a state of mesits nefesh, actually brings out a sort of higher level of Raya Mehemna than a different Rebbe who didn't have that opportunity. Because we said that basically there's two ways of explaining what the Raya Mehemna, the faithful shepherd, the shepherd of faith, what he does. He either gives das to the people, das of Elokus, like a new, not only knowledge but sort of awareness. And in addition, he can also bring the people to mesits nefesh. He brings them to basically serve God at the level they're willing to give their lives. So he said that when is it that you have to have mesits nefesh? So he says, and you really reach the essence of your soul, is kasis lama'or. When you're crushed, you can reach the luminary. In other words, we said that the real uniqueness of what you need Moshe Rabbeinu for is to serve Hashem at a level where you're tapping into the essence of your soul. Because every Jew has two levels of faith. Basically, your faith can be at a makif due to the fact that you have a soul above that sees God, or your faith can be panemius based on the fact that the essence of your soul is one with God, if you recall. So the makif faith is because there's a part of your soul which is not in your body, which is seeing God. That's the mazel. And it has a effect on your body. It makes you believe in God. But just like the mazel is out of your body, the faith that you have is not really internalized. Whereas if you connect with the essence of your faith, of yourself, then that essence is up there is also in your body. In other words, there's a part of the essence is also where you are in your body, not just sort of beyond your body, because the essence is everywhere. So if you connect with the essence of yourself, that same essence is also the you that's inside of your body. Therefore, if you connect with that level of faith, it can also make you act according to your faith. But for that, you need to attach yourself to the essence of your soul. And for this is Ata Tetzaveh. This is what you need to connect with Moshe Rabbeinu for. Ata, you command, connect the Jewish people. Moshe Rabbeinu connects us to our soul and feeds us sort of this faith, like we talked about in the Maimer about acquiring a Hebrew slave, that he brings you up to connecting to your panemius of your soul. So what this usually looks like is that it gives you a das in godliness. In other words, before you're sort of walking around at this animalistic level, and suddenly you have das. So that would be a good example of not having das. That's how we are basically. Someone walks in and we turn into clowns. That's basically what we are. We're clowns. But the truth is that when you're connected, you're not a clown. And that's because you have an awareness. So the idea, David, can you wake up all these guys in there? They're sleeping, these other guys. Tell them at least that they're going to come here. They can learn Chassidus. Okay, got it. Okay. So then
sing to them.
Awareness is the third level.
Okay, fine.
Is that good?
I know. Yeah.
So the other thing is,
awareness is the third level, or it goes on?
No. So I'm not sure what you mean by third level. But what I said is that basically the Moshe, when he connects you to your soul, your essence of your soul, it can either bring you to the state of sort of what we call animal to man. When I say the animal to man, I'm talking about not your animal soul. Like we discussed in last week in the Maimorim. It wasn't really last week, it was Mishpatim. But the whole idea that when you acquire a Jewish slave, right, that Hashem has animal souls and godly souls amongst the Jewish people. And there's certain levels of souls that are just not able to really concentrate and be in communion with Hashem every second. It's this because they came down to too low of a level of this Hishtalshalus, basically. So Moshe connects them to their true self and gives them what's called das in Elokus. Das is what differentiates animal from man. So all of a sudden you become like a man. Your soul becomes on a man level. You can have das. This is one of the things that Moshe Rabbeinu gives you. That's what we learned for the last couple of weeks about that. Yeah? It rings a bell? This whole idea?
No, I was talking to you.
I was talking to you.
Sounds familiar.
Sounds familiar? Whereas there's another level that we're speaking about in this mimer, that the whole idea of Mordecai was the Raya Mehemna in his generation. He did something different. We don't talk about like the great quality of Mordecai is that he gave people das. in Elokus, we talk about that he brought them to a level of mesirus nefesh. They were willing to die for Hashem. They were happy to give up their lives. That's a different level. So we're saying that's also something that the Raya Mehemna does, but it's a much deeper level of the Raya Mehemna. And what we said was that it's not that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have the power to bring his generation to mesirus nefesh. It's just that he didn't have to. Because the people weren't coming against them in the same type of way. So we see that there's a sort of advantage of the Raya Mehemna that comes out in the time of gallus, which is not found otherwise, because when the people are crushed, it allows them to reach. It allows them to reach the ma'or, kasis lama'or, crushed to the luminary, which they can't reach that level of the luminary unless there's a situation of kasis. So we see that the generations which are sort of in worse shape, the Moshe Rabbeinu, his qualities and his powers are even higher than they are when times are good, because he brings the Jews to that level. Okay, that's what we said. It was a review.
Where are we in the text now?
Zion.
You compare Mordecai to Moshe.
We said many times Mordecai is Moshe.
Okay.
It actually says in the Gemara, Mordecai Badoro Kamoshe Badoro. That's actually a statement like the whole one of the classic ways that we talk about the whole notion that there's the Hispashtus de Moshe B'chol Dora, is because it says clearly that Mordecai in his generation was Moshe in his generation. We quoted that earlier.
That Mordecai in his
was Moshe of his generation. Okay. Zion. He says, V'hine Yedua. It's known, Shamasiris nefesh bepoel al Torah mitzvahs. That the Masiris nefesh in actuality, in other words, not just potential, but like the willingness, mamash, to give your life, of all the Jewish people, Kol Yisrael, Haisa bepurim. It took place, really for the first time ever, in Purim. I mean, there was times when individual Jews, let's say, had to go to war and sacrifice their lives, but the whole Jewish people had mesirus nefesh in actuality. This was at Purim, specifically during Bizman Gezeras Haman, at the time of the Gezerah. Mesirus nefesh to Chanukah Bizman Gezeras Yavan, because we also had mesirus nefesh at Chanukah, which was at the time of the Greeks. It wasn't the mesirus nefesh of all of Am Yisrael. It was mostly Matisyahu and his sons. But mesirus nefesh bisman gezeras Haman haisa b'chol Yisrael. Whereas here in Purim, it was the entire Jewish people had this quality of mesirus nefesh. Bal pi zeh yesh levar ma shemuva ba'maimer memidrash. According to this, we can explain what's brought in the Maimer, again from the Frierdiker Rebbe. From the Midrash, here you go, Levi. It's pretty good timing. Mordecai hayashakul bedora kamosha bedora. That it says, and we brought it now a second time from the Midrash, that Mordecai was equal in his generation like Moshe in his generation. This is one of the. Again, we said this is the last mimer that the Rebbe ever gave, right? So this is one of the highlighted, stick out paragraphs we're about to read. It's like pretty juicy situation over here the Rebbe lays down on us. Yeah. So he says, based on this notion, it kind of comes out of nowhere in the mimer, is the truth. It's just he just wants to have us know this information. He says that based on that midrash that says that Mordecai was equal in his generation like Moshe was in his generation, Dagam she's pashtusa de Moshe hu mecholdor. Even though the extension of Moshe really is in every generation, Mekom Mekom Isa b'midrash Mordechai dafka hayashaka b'duro kamoshe b'duro. But the midrash goes out on a limb basically and identifies by name one generation. Mordechai with dafka, he was equal in his generation like Moshe was in his generation. Really, you could say about any leader that lived in any time. The Yesh Lomar. So the Rebbe says Yesh Lomar. One could say, Shema Mailos de Mordechai Yehudi Hu Shehu Hayaraya Mehemna Begiloi Shel Kol Yisrael Shebedoro. He says one of the great, why is Moshe sort of indicated, Mordecai indicated and sticking out, because the Mila of Mordecai HaYehudi was that he was the Raya Mehemna, he was the faithful shepherd, and there he puts in italics or whatever, in Giloi, in a revealed way, Shel Kol Yisrael, of the entire Jewish people, Shebadur, in his generation. And he says, Bedugmas Moshe Raya Mehemna. And this is very much in the example of Moshe, who was the faithful shepherd. Shem Shich Das L'Kol Yisrael Shebadur. In other words, it was like one of a kind, unmistakable, you can't compare this person to anybody else. Just like Moshe, who was the Raya Mehemna, who fed Das to the Jewish people. Moshe had a slightly different role, right? Because we said he didn't bring them to mesits nefesh, he fed them Das. But still, it was a clear thing that he was feeding Das to everybody. Kamuvan gam mizeh, which is understood also from this, Shedur shel Moshe, kol anshe dur nikra dur deya. As it's known that Moshe fed them Das, because the whole generation of Moshe has a name called the dur deya. They were called the generation of knowledge, basically, the generation of knowing. Because, like we're called the ikvas of the Mashiach, the heels of the Mashiach, that was the first generation, so they were like the head. They had pure knowledge of God, they saw God. So the whole generation was called dur deya because Moshe fed them Das.
Sorry. How do you read the footnote?
The footnote?
Yeah, 39.
Rei Si Vayikra Rabba, Perek Tes. I guess Aleph is the first Torah there, and Bamidbar Rabba, Perek Tes Gimel.
That was the first time was Mordecai was in serious nefesh. Was it the only time in history, really?
It was definitely
the
that all of Jewish people simultaneously had mesits nefesh. Probably.
Can't think of another time.
Well, there wasn't necessarily, because after that, basically Hashem sort of did a kindness. What's that?
And people were spread out.
Right, but we were spread out then also, is the
so
truth. But he had it says that Achashverosh was one of the few people in history that ruled, what it says, Malach Bakipa. He ruled with a sort of domination. He was the ruler of the entire world. So there was no escaping his decree. Like, not every time in history there's a ruler that his arm reaches to every single place on earth.
Right.
Basically, it's very rare. It was only a few times in history. That's why it was so.
So the difference with Mordecai's generation, they had the Torah from before, so they were building upon the Das from the past. And that's why they were able to go to the Syrian message. And they were crushed. They were also crushed.
The main thing we're saying is they were crushed, basically. Like they were, the whole idea that we got the Torah, it was the high times. Hashem was showing himself to us. So you can't simultaneously be crushed when the full revelation of God is before you. That was one of the questions we had in the Maimer. It doesn't make sense. Matan Torah, we were on the highest level, and we only began to receive the Torah. Purim, we were on the lowest level, where there's no revelation of God. His name's not mentioned in the Megillah. There was no miracles. And how then we received it? So that's the point. Because there's no revelations, that shows like the true reception is not based on an outer cause of revelations and light. It comes from truly within. Anyway, so he says like this. Now we're in this bracket. And the bracket is okay. He says like this. Ela shebemoshe hayagilu inyan zeh shu raya mehemna de kol Yisrael. So this inyan that we're talking about, which is that he's the raya mehemna of the whole Jewish people, he's the clear leader. This was al yedei shemshich das lekol anshe duro. It's because he brought das, knowledge of God. His generation was called dur deya, to his people. And Mordecai hayagilo inyan zem, whereas Mordecai revealed this inyan, that he was the number one leader, ayde shagila koach mesits nefesh, by revealing the power of mesits nefesh shebechol anshe dur, like we said. He gave them the ability to sacrifice their lives. So he says, like, this is a line, again, that it's just thrown in here. The Rebbe's definitely trying to, it's like, doesn't seemingly have so much to do with anything until you realize that the whole mimer is basically about this line. He says, V'yesh lomer da'ayde shemevi ba'ha-mimer. The Rebbe says, we can say that the fact that the Frierdiker Rebbe brings this in the mimer, Masha kasu b'midrash, Mordecai bedora hayashakol kamoshe bedora. That why does he bring this? That Mordecai in his generation was equal to Moshe in his generation. Al yidei zeh pasak bal hamaimer as din al atzmo. He says, therefore, the one who wrote the Maimer, the Frierdiker Rebbe, made a psak din on himself. That he is the Raya Mehemna, the Moshe Rabbeinu revealed of the entirety of his generation. There's no one else but him. There's only one leader. And it's clear like it was in Moshe's day, and it's clear like it was in Mordecai's day. And you and I were talking about this recently, like, you might think that it's not clear, but the truth is that the Rebbe is saying it is clear. You know, a few people said, where was the Mordecai in the time of the Holocaust? The Rebbe, we weren't there, the truth is. But the Rebbe is saying that if you ask any Jew who was the leader of Am Yisrael at that time, he was revealed undeniably. There is a man who is leading the entire Am Yisrael, and his name is Rabbi Schneerson of Lubavitch. That's what the Rebbe is saying. And the Rebbe himself wrote this. This is just a crazy thing. I mean, I don't know if the Rebbe is going to bring an interesting footnote here, which like sort of backs him up. But really, a normal person couldn't just say this. That because the Frierdiker Rebbe said that Mordecai in his generation was like Moshe in his generation, therefore the Frierdiker Rebbe is Moshe of his generation. Like, okay, it's like 2 + 2 = 4 maybe, but like, it's lav dafka would you come to that conclusion or I. But the fact is, the Rebbe says this in a Hasidic Maimer, which is basically we call Ruach HaKodesh. So he's saying that this was a psak din, that the Rebbe brought this in his Maimer to reveal himself that he is the one. And one could definitely easily say by way of extension, since the Rebbe is bringing this in his Maimer and making a psak din that the Frierdiker Rebbe was, in other words, that is the Rebbe of his generation, he's making the same, similar psak din about himself. And look what it says in footnote 40. He says that al derech haperush b'lashon HaMishnah. This is something that the Rebbe brings different times and different years and so forth. This is like a drasha that's been rehearsed. But he says, this is an interesting footnote. In the lesson of the Mishnah Pirkei Avos, the beginning of Perek Gimel, where it says that din v'cheshbon, din v'achka cheshbon. In other words, it says that a person is going to have to make a din v'cheshbon before Hashem. A din v'cheshbon means you're going to make they call it like a duch, right? Like you're going to have to make a report to Hashem. And a din v'cheshbon means you're going to make a calculation, like a cheshbon is like you make all your calculations, and a din is like, this is my ruling about yourself and about your work down here on this world. Basically, when you go up there, you're going to have to make a din v'cheshbon before your maker. And so he says like this, it's strange that it says din and then cheshbon. It should say cheshbon v'din, because how does a person normally come up with the din is because you make calculation first and then you make a judgment. That's the way I explained it also. It's the only normal way to explain it. You don't make a din and then make a cheshbon. So he says, Al pi divrei Mishnah Sham, he says it can be explained based on the rest, a continuation of the Mishnah there, where it says, Nifrain mimenu midaito v'shelo midaito. It says Hashem basically sees the score. You know, you're going to think you're sneaking away and you're going to get away with something, but Hashem is going to exact punishment, payment from you, midaito v'shelo midaito, whether you know it or whether you don't know it. In other words, you don't have to also always be aware that you're being judged. He knows the secret thoughts.
And it's opposite too.
What's that?
Opposite too.
It's midaito.
No, like Hashem sees all good you do.
Yeah, but the Mishnah is indicating like that you're taking loans basically from Hashem throughout your life, and it's going to be collected, these loans, and they're going to be paid back whether you like whether you know about it or whether you don't know about it. I'm just saying we always want to talk about the positive. This is what the Mishnah says. It's talking about taking loans and basically borrowing from Hashem. That you don't everything's being recorded in a book. In other words, so what's the idea there? That it says Achrei Adam posek midaito dino shel chavero posek din la'atzmo shelo midaito. There's a whole story that this is brought in the Gemara. Basically, David HaMelech did something wrong, basically with Bathsheba, right? And so Nasan Hanavi comes into him, and he doesn't want to basically tell him that he did something wrong, so he tells him like a made up story, and he asks David to judge the story. And he says, like, basically one man has all the million sheep in the world, and this little poor guy, he has one little sheep, and the one man took his one little sheep. What do you think should be done with this man? He said he should be punished. So he says, King David, it's you, you know? So basically, why did he do all this? Because there's a whole concept that a person, I'm taking this a little bit out of context to a different sikha, the Rebbe says, which is very interesting, that a Jew is beyond the Seder Ishtalshlus. Since we're like above the justice system, where our souls come from, it's impossible to judge a Jew. What you can't, because you can't. How are you going to put a judgment when the whole justice system only comes into existence below and after the Jew's entity? So actually, it says that only a Jew can only judge himself, and if he'll judge himself, then he puts himself into the judgment system, and therefore he can be judged. So it says that when you go up to heaven, you probably heard this like story before. They're gonna ask you to judge someone else. And it's like this little story about David HaMelech. It's like a setup. They're trying to get you to judge yourself, thinking that it's someone else, so that you can be judged. Because they can't just judge you outright, because you're like the king. You're like beyond judgment, basically. So that's what it means that they're gonna. That's what we just read, basically. Once a person judges willingly the judgment of his friend, posek din la'atzmo shalom midaitu. Then he winds up paskening a din on himself without knowing. So that's what it means. They're going to nifroi mimenu. They're going to exact payment midaito v'shalom midaito, knowingly and unknowingly. And what it means is, first unknowingly, you make a judgment thinking it's someone else, and then knowingly. First knowingly midaito v'shalom midaitos. First, knowingly, you make a judgment on someone else, and then unknowingly, you just wound up making a judgment about yourself by doing that. Is everyone, you get that?
Yeah.
So what he's saying basically is that this is what the Rebbe did, right? When he made a judgment, said that he pulled out the Mordecai and he put it in the mimer. Mordecai is the leader of the generation, judging willingly about his fellow. He unwillingly made a judgment about himself. That's what the Rebbe is saying here. Kevan sha'al pi din. So and it's the same exact teaching when you say din v'cheshbon, which is basically, we said, also out of order. You make a judgment and then you make a calculation, right? It should be calculation. It's the same thing. You make a din about someone else, and then you unwittingly make a calculation about yourself. So basically, when you judge the other, you judge yourself. So the Rebbe is saying here that the Frierdiker Rebbe went out on a limb, basically, and like paskined about Mordecai and his generation, that he was the leader, and he unwittingly judged that about himself. So you could definitely say, by way of extension, you could definitely say the Rebbe is doing the same thing. He's saying that the Frierdiker Rebbe is the leader of the generation, unwittingly. You know, it's a whole, like I said, it's like, what are you doing in there? But he put that in there. All right? So we should know what the score is.
So by teaching this, are you doing that?
So everyone asked that question. So not only by teaching it, but by learning it. In other words, what the Rebbe sort of gave us is a certain sense of like, you know, like a certain empowerment. You know, shlucho shel adam kamoso. In other words, in a certain sense, like knowing this information and knowing like where the leadership is coming from, and that that you are connecting to your soul through the motion of the generation. This is what each one of us has this power to give to another person, but just by coming across this information.
We all have our role.
Yeah.
In our generation.
We have basically, okay, but anyway.
We're not here by chance. That's for sure.
Okay, so
Can we summarize din and then...
din and cheshbon means you psak din about somebody else, and then where's the cheshbon come after that? Once you make a din, then it winds up retroactively making a cheshbon about the person who made that din, that din also is calculated on the person who made the din. It goes back on the person who made the din. A cheshbon is made on him, that he's the nasi.
Right, how is that? I forgot how that's first.
You forgot how that's first?
How din is before...
Because the Mishnah says din v'cheshbon.
Right, the reason again?
So the reason is because it's telling you something, that when you make a din, you're making about someone else, you're making a cheshbon about yourself simultaneously.
Okay.
In other words, why do you have to make a din v'cheshbon before Hashem when you go l'mayla? Because you're going to go l'mayla, they're going to say, what's with so-and-so, Shlomo and Yitzchak, tell me about their case, and you're going to make a din, and then the cheshbon is going to go on you, because it was really about yourself. So when you paskin about someone else, you're unwittingly pasking about yourself.
You're not calculating the story that's going on above, or...
If you were, then you would say cheshbon v'din, right? So the fact it says din v'cheshbon means first the din, and then there's a retroactive cheshbon about yourself. Okay, so that's, let's go on. Os ches. It's just in there. I don't know. He just threw that in there. He wants you to have that part of the
Good thing he did.
part of the story there.
You need that.
Listen, yeah, it's powerful. Anyway, ches. V'alpi zeh yesh levar kesher v'seder inyanim ba'maimer. Okay, so this was that tricky paragraph that I told you was coming, basically trying to organize the whole Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer and say, like, why is this out of order and this comes before that. This, remember, the whole time I was trying to warn you guys about that. So here it comes, basically. So he says, we want to understand, according to this, we want to understand the connection of things in the Maimer. Kesher v'seder, the order of the Inyanim ba'maimer. Bebira pasik v'ata Tetzaveh. When it comes to explaining the original verse that we explained in our Maimer, which again was not the beginning of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer. We started with the verse Va'ata Tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael v'yikcho elecha Shem en zayizach kasus lamar. Right? So we want to explain the order of drushas that came out of that pasuk. Shebetechila, in the beginning, mevaras haperush deva'ata Tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael. At first we explained, or the Frierdiker Rebbe explained, that Ata Tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael equals Moshe hu makasher hu mechaber es b'nei Yisrael. It means that Moshe is the connector. Tetzaveh comes from the word connect, and he connects the Jewish people im orein sof al yidei shuzar mefarnes es amuna, by feeding us our faith. He connects us with the orein sof. Basically, he gives us like the das that we need, and then all of a sudden we find that in ourselves there's an orein sof, there's the essence of our soul in there, and this is Va'ata Tetzaveh, connects us.
Mechaber?
Mechaber means to join. Mekasher, mechaber, same thing. Kind of. V'achrei zeh, so that's the first thing we got out of the Maimer. Then, Mevar shegam ro Yisrael shebechol dor. Then he explains that the shepherd of Jewish people in every generation is pashtus de Moshe. The extension of Moshe, machzikim es amunah de Yisrael, they strengthen the Jewish people's faith. V'kamo Mordecai, just like Mordecai, Moshe shebedoro, shechizak es amunasim shel Yisrael, who strengthened the amunah of the Jewish people, lamod chazak, to stand strong, b'limud haTorah, v'kiyum haMitzvah. So first Va'ata Tetzaveh, and then that's extended into every generation. V'la'achrei zeh, mivar haPerush b'kasis lamaor. And afterwards, the Frierdiker Rebbe explains the explanation of the words kasis lamaur, which means right, which is in the pasuk Va'ata Tetzaveh, shemedaber lechora b'Moshe atzmo, which seemingly the verse in the Torah is talking about Moshe himself, right? Because Va'ata Tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael is going on Moshe, right? V'yichcho elecha Shem en zayizach kasis lamaur, seemingly. It's still a drasha about Moshe, and when he goes into the verse Kasis Lamaor, Ki zeh Moshe megal b'chinas ha'maor to Yisrael, he explains that since Moshe is the one who reveals the maor, the essence of the Jewish people, etzem neshama, the essence of the soul, who beikar al his pashtusa delay, it's mainly through the extension of Moshe shebizman gallus, which happens in the time of gallus. So once again, first he starts off with Ata Tetzaveh, Moshe connects. Then he starts explaining that the Raya Mehemna is every generation exists. Then he goes into this explanation, explaining that Kasis Lamaur, which according to how you have normally read it, is referring to Moshe, because it's in the pasuk talking about Moshe. He then goes into, no, it's not really about Moshe, because Kasis, broken, crushed, doesn't really apply to Moshe as much as it'll apply to later generations. So he comes and says that the Kasis Lamaur vort is really more nogea to the extension of Moshe in the generation than Moshe himself. She'oru b'Yisrael koach ha'mesiras nefesh, because they aroused amongst the Jewish people the power of mesiras nefesh. She'al yidei zeh hu ikar giloi etzem neshama ma'or, and that's really the main way to arouse the essence of the neshama, not just through feeding them das, as we said, but through bringing them to the power of this mesiras nefesh. It's like the Moshe b'ta'araso. It's like the best Moshe you could have is a Moshe who's able to bring you to the ultimate mesiras nefesh. Okay, here's the question. According to what we said above, Ha'in de kasis lamar shayach leva'at tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael, that the notion of kasis lamar, being crushed to reach the illuminary of the soul, is connected to va'at tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael, is connected to that Moshe is going to join us to our essence of our soul. And this is only able to be done because Moshe and his extension join the Jewish people to the Or Ein Sof. Uba'akasev ne'emar kasis lamaor behemshech levayikhu elech Hashem en zayizach. Whereas in the actual verse of Va'at Tetzaveh, there's an interruption of this flow with the words that we just conveniently skipped over, which is Vayikhu elech Hashem en zayizach. They will bring to you olive oil. I'll explain this all again in 1 second. The Inyan Vayikhu elecha, that this whole notion of they will bring you olive oil, that the Jewish people will bring oil to Moshe, Hu she Yisrael mosifim tosafos, or b'Moshe, is that we bring Moshe an extra something, right? So there's a question here. The idea is that it all was going well. We talked about Ata Tetzaveh. Moshe will join us. And then we said, this is all the Frierdiker Rebbe's mimer. Then we said that that's really the union of every generation, Moshe. And then we said, perfect. Kasis Lamaur. Just because you're broken, like you were in Mordecai's generation, that's the real Ma'or. That's the Moshe that's going to do it for you, to bring you to your true essence, because you're in a status of crushed. Everything's fine and good, except we left out a section of the pasuk, which is Vayikhu elech Hashem en zayizach. All of a sudden, it's supposed to give Moshe Rabbeinu something, and that part of the mimer he did not darshan out. He didn't basically, he said the whole thing like it was one smooth Devar Torah, but he left out that part of the pasuk. So that's basically the question. What are we going to do with that part?
The part that you get crushed?
That part was perfect. The crushed part is that in a time of gallus, we reach the Ma'or, because thanks for Mordecai, who's the Moshe of the generation.
But even his name's not mentioned in this parsha, is it? Moshe. It's the essence of what you're talking about.
Right, that's true. That's a whole other concept, but that's true.
Because we didn't get to a point of mesits nefesh, that's why we didn't bring the oil to Moshe at that point. That's why he left it out.
What part do you leave out?
The words Vayikhu elech Hashem en zayizach. They will bring to you olive oil. Right? That is like he skipped over it.
Okay.
Mordecai got it.
Whereas the whole thing worked like perfectly without it, and that's maybe why he left it out. No, but what is it doing in there?
Is the grammatical question?
It's not a grammatical
It's a
question.
left-out question.
No, this is like a new question. It's not one of the original 4 questions. Okay.
Well, wasn't it why they bring the oil to Moshe and not Aaron? Because Aaron did-
Right, but we answered that. We said because it means that when Moshe connects them, then Moshe has an aliyah. Right? So we said why they bring it to Moshe, because it's because we changed the whole verse. It doesn't have anything to do with olive oil anymore and the menorah. It has to do with Moshe connecting them to the Or Ein Sof, and therefore automatically they bring something to Moshe. But why didn't the Frierdiker Rebbe basically bring it in the middle of this whole drasha when he's understanding the verse Va'at Tetzaveh? Okay, so Tess. Hine hakasu v'kibel Yehudim es asher yichelu lasos. So this verse, where it says v'kibel Yehudim es asher yichelu lasos, the Jewish people received upon themselves what they began to do at Matan Torah. B'pashtus, medaber b'pashtus is simply speaking v'azman shel achrei hanes Purim. It's talking about the time after the miracle of Purim is over. If you go into the Megillah and you actually read the Megillah, this verse takes place after the whole basically story is over. Right? That the miracle happened and we're in charge and the Jewish people are having a good time. And then it says, the Jewish people received upon themselves that which they began to do at Matan Torah. V'yesh lomar. And we want to say that that what it says in the mimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe that we're discussing, that they took upon themselves that which they began to do at Matan Torah, means means that they they took upon themselves, in the days of Achashverosh, they received upon themselves that which they only began in Matan Torah, who gam lefi pashtus hakasuv shebekibel haya achrei hanes. So the Rebbe wants to, this is like really the Rebbe's like whole chiddush now that he's bringing on the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer. He wants to say that we can actually say that normally we were thinking that even though it says they received upon themselves what they began to do in Matan Torah, even though it says that after the miracle of Purim, it really means during the stress of the miracle of Purim, right? When is it the Jewish people took upon themselves to receive the Torah? When they were under duress, when they could have walked away from God, when basically they said, we were with you, Mordecai, even in death. So that was the reception. So that's where the reception, according to everything we explained up till now, really happened. That when they were under pressure of death, they anyway wanted to take on the Torah. But strangely, that verse in the Megillah which says that they received the Torah, after, and they took upon themselves what they began to do at Matan Torah, it happens in the story after the whole dark part of the story is over and the good times are rolling in. So everyone wants to say that since the pasuk actually comes there, then we can also explain it where it goes. In other words, that really the full reception of the Torah didn't only take place during the time of the Gezerah, but even after the Gezerah was over and their good times were rolling in for the Jews, that's really when they had this mesits nefesh and took upon themselves what they only began in Matan Torah. Because they always say, it's not such a crazy chiddush. That's where the pasuk anyway is in the Megillah. So since the pasuk is in there in the Megillah, let's not learn it out of context. Somehow we have to say that even when Haman was dead and his sons were hung, then only after then is when we really received the Torah in full for the first time. This is like the chiddush of the Rebbe.
So it's post the crushing.
Post-crushing, seemingly. Seemingly post-crushing. That's what he's saying. We're going to learn that it's not necessarily post-crushing. Post-crushing. Al pizeh, accordingly, so therefore, the Rebbe is saying, according to what I'm teaching you now, then this notion of us receiving upon ourselves what we began in Matan Torah, it really has two different factors. There was the reception of the Torah upon ourselves during the time of the decree. Through their total self-sacrifice, as the Frierdiker Rebbe explained. That was the Frierdiker Rebbe's whole vort. The Frierdiker Rebbe never dipped into this concept. And then there was the Kabbalah Shaisa Achrei Hanes to Purim. Then there was the reception after the miracle of Purim, which is the Rebbe's whole chiddush. Shinayla Yoser Gama Kabbalah Bizmana Gezerah Kedilakam. And the Rebbe is going to get crazy about this. This was a higher reception of Torah than that which was accomplished in the midst of Mamash Holocaust, that they received the Torah upon themselves even in the midst of the decree and all the horrors. What they did in the good times that followed that was even a higher reception of Torah than during the time of the decree. That's what the Rebbe wants to say, and he says, Kedilakam, as we'll explain.
Because they really didn't have to. That's what I'm saying.
Well, if it was a crushed or no.
It was okay. It was like you know what I mean? There was no like back up against the wall.
Adarabah, so they had that all before Matan Torah. Also, in other words, from Matan Torah until then, they also had that. So in other words, like just because times are good is not a reason to suddenly be able to receive the Torah. It took the times should be bad in order for us to receive the Torah. So this mamash doesn't really make any sense until we're going to see some wisdom thrown at us. Okay, v'yesh lomar. So we have to say, sha'al derech zehu b'nogei kasis lamaor. He says the same is true when it comes to the word broken, crushed to reach the luminary. In the kasis shebizman gallus magim la'amar, as we said, that it means that when you're crushed in gallus, you reach to the luminary, dafka. And he says also this, therefore, has two different factors. There's two levels of being crushed in the gallus. Just like we just explained, there's like before the Gezerah and after the Gezerah. When we're found in a situation of crushed mitzad zeh, from the fact sheishnam gezeros al kiyum Torah mitzvahs, because there's people trying to stop us from doing Torah mitzvahs. Kamosha bizman amiras haMaimer, just like the Frierdiker Rebbe says, the Rebbe said the Maimer in a time in Russia when there's people coming against him, totally trying to stop Yiddishkeit from existing in the world. You can get killed for putting on tefillin. You get killed for learning Torah. So he says that type of crushedness was like right up to Frierdiker Rebbe's alley. That's what he was talking about. Because in his time, it was like mamash during the Gezerah of Mordecai, of Haman, people were coming against us full on in the gallus to try and stop us from doing mitzvahs. And therefore, you need a mamash, a guy like the Frierdiker Rebbe, to bring the Jewish people to be willing to die anyway, which is known and well documented. We spoke about it. The whole system that you had going over there, that every time someone was killed, or God forbid, or taken away to Siberia, the next day there would be a new malamed sent to that place, a new mikveh opened up. This was the whole underground system. I just was reading about it last night. There was like, they literally did not, they didn't even have, there was a story like the secretary of the Frierdiker Rebbe, who was working hand in hand with him on this project, basically like, he was the one sort of like carrying out all the operation. He went to the Frierdiker Rebbe crying, begging, please, just let me have a half an hour to daven. That's how busy they were like in this operation, and the Frierdiker Rebbe said like, I'm sorry, you don't even have a half an hour to daven. Your half an hour to daven is going to take away mamish chayas and life from thousands of Yidden. They couldn't even daven for a half an hour. These are people who were accustomed to davening for 4 hours a day. So this was like this is what the ship they were pushing, and it was literally like mamish this operation of people were being captured, and another person was popping up the next day in their place. It was total mesits nefesh on the simplest level, and through this. They reached the Ma'or. He brought Jewish people to a place that they were willingly walking into their own demise for Yiddishkeit. That's pretty much Mordecai. So he says, that's one level. That's Kasis Lama'or on one level. But there's another Kasis Lama'or. Shegam Kish Yisrael Nimtzoim b'matzav shel harchava. That even when the Jewish people will find themselves in a situation of harchava, which means basically everything's good, spaciousness, peace, times when no one's trying to come against us. Harchava b'gashmias, v'gam harchava b'ruchnias. Not only physically we have everything we need, but even spiritually have everything we need. You don't have one mikvah that people are trying to kill you. You got 5 mikvahs you can go to. This one's hot, this one's cold, this one's this. You have everything. You have 10 different types of kosher sushi, no problem. You can get with the wasabi, without the wasabi. Everything.
What's harchava?
What's wasabi?
Wasabi.
Harchava means like spaciousness.
Spacious.
So he says, even there's another level of kasis lamar, which means even if you have everything good, physically and spiritually good. But what's not good? You're still in gallus. And this is exactly the situation of what happened after the Purim miracle was over, and the Megillah does not end. The Megillah has a whole chapter plus of basically explaining the situation of the Jewish people in a great matzav, under Achashverosh, in Gallus, but like having the lap of luxury. Mordecai was second to the king, and all of Haman's goods were transferred to the Jewish people, and it's the mamash, the good times. It's one problem, is that we're in Gallus. This words that we say like to indicate like our highest point. Every week, we say that the Jewish people had light and simcha and sason and yikar, but pashtus v'gam beruchnius, which means also they had it spiritually as well. Mordecai being the second to the king, and he was such a moser nefesh, you could be sure they had Hanukkah menorahs in the city square or the like. And what's more, shegam beis Haman nitan laEsther, which means the house of Haman was given to Esther, which means that there was the Indian of his hapcha, right? There was a very high level of service to God. You know what his hapcha is? It means you turn the darkness and you turn it into light. The whole usually in a gullus, we're lucky if we have his skafia. The Jewish people behave themselves. They don't get dragged into, the klippas and sort of assimilate. It's one thing not to assimilate. It's another thing to have his hapcha, to transform the non-Jewish elements of the world into Jewish elements. As it said, the whole Persia was trying to convert to Judaism suddenly. We had a hishapcha. But the famous story from the Gemara, which is why we don't in fact say Hallel on Purim, Akati Avde Achashverosh Anna. We were still slaves to Achashverosh. With all the great things, we were in gallus. Hem shvurim v'nidakim kasis mizeh shehem b'gallus. We were pashat broken kasis just from the fact that we were in gallus. We had no reason to be broken mitzad the events that were going on in our lives. It was just like an underlying sort of machiv thing that we are not in Gula Shlema. We want Mashiach now. V'al yidei hakasis to Yisrael mizeh. That being broken from this pashat shenimtzayim b'gallus, simply that you're in gallus, even though no one's trying to kill you. Megim la ma'or. That's how you reach to the ma'or. So there's two levels of reaching to the ma'or. There's reaching to the ma'or because people are trying to kill you. That will for sure get you to the ma'or. But as you mentioned, remember I said it's going to come back. It is like an outside cause. I was trying to push that away at the time, and I said, no, it's just that we have this thing in us, and that just reveals it. But the truth is, you're right. That it's something that's pushing us to reach the ma'or. Whereas in the case where we're just not happy that we're in gallus, there's no one pushing us to stop being Jewish. On the contrary, you can be Jewish, we'll invite you to the White House, everything's fine, no problems. But the fact is, you're broken just because we're not having our empire of the Jewish people and God's oneness dominating the whole world. You're broken from this. It also reaches you to the Ma'or, and as the Rebbe said, a higher level of the Ma'or.
It's a feel like a hidden brokenness in a way. You don't necessarily realize you're broken.
Well, but the Rebbe is trying to say that the Moshe Rabbeinu, his job is to bring out your hidden brokenness.
But it's harder because it's hidden.
This is the job that the Rebbe has. You start to see why this is the last mimer of the Rebbe, basically. He's just leaving our generation and telling you, this is your situation. This is my situation. This is our situation. That we're, so to speak, you think they have it good. Trust me, we are still in gallus, and we've got to mamish be broken from the fact that we're in gallus. And that reaches a higher level of the essence of your soul than if the communists are coming after you. Hot tamale.
Israel.
How does it pertain to living in Israel?
But it also does, because people live here, they think they're
They think they made it to the good
liberated.
times. Yeah, liberated. Okay, we have a few more minutes, yeah? Ba'inyanhu, what's that? Ba'inyanhu, just a couple more minutes, a couple more lines of the words of the living God. Ha'inyanhu, that's what they call Chassidus, Divrei Elokim Chaim. Ba'inyanhu, Dehine she Yisrael, Hem Shvurim Mizeh Shem B'Gallus, this, that the Jewish people are broken because we're in Gallus. Gam Kashiyesh Lem Harchava B'Gashmias V'Ruchnias, even then we have it great, we're rich, physically and spiritually. Hu ki retzono amisi shel kol echad miYisrael. It's because the real, true desire of every single Jew, sheyeh gilui elokus, is that he wants there to be a godly revelation. He wants gilui elokus. That's what a yid ultimately wants. Va'ad shezeh gilui elokus nogei le'etzem mitziyuso, and he doesn't just want it; it's relevant to his very essence of his being. Something's wrong and deeply wrong with a yid when God is not revealed around him in every way. Even though he has everything he needs and he lacks nothing, it's so important to him that godliness should be found in him. That's what we are. We're chelek elokam imal mamish. It's bound up with with a life need, an essential life need, that godliness should be revealed. And if it's not, even if things are okay for you, you're broken. Therefore, in the time of Gallus, the fact that it is not shine an open revelation of God, like there was in the time of the temple. And let's just depict that for a second. What is it like in the time of the temple? Everybody on earth knew that the center of the world was Jerusalem because God dwelled in the Beis HaMikdash. And if you wanted to go and mamish see God, you could go there. It's like the Eiffel Tower, lahavdil. You want to go see the Eiffel Tower? It's right there. You want to see the God of earth, heaven and earth, who resides in Israel? I'm telling you, this is a situation that how great would life be if this was like, everyone got this right? You know, all the nations, all the scientists, all the atheists, all the religions. One thing was clear. If you want to go see God, you came to the Jewish people in Jerusalem because they were the guardians of the temple. It would make the world a better place. So this is, as long as this is not happening, and it's not shining a Gilei Elokus like it was in the time of the temple, let alone just that, like, fact. What came along with that was mamish revelation. He says, particularly when a person will think, Sha'am Razal, this is what the sages said, Kol mishalo nivna beis hamikdash biyamav, harizeh ke'ilu nechra biyamav. Especially if you're going to put this into the mix, which is that the sages said that anyone whose generation did not see the building of the Beis HaMikdash, it's as if they saw the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. It was destroyed in their days. Because if you're not building it, it's like you're watching it being destroyed in front of your eyes. Hine mizeh atzmo is it in ganzen to treiselt. Zu treiselt. You're in ganzen zu treiselt. We have our Yiddish professor over here, David, is going to help us translate that. But it means broken. You're completely broken from this. V'gamshu v'darga nailis v'yoser. Even though you are on a very high level.
Why switch to Yiddish then? More comfortable maybe.
No, I mean, he edited it for emphasis. So he says, even though you might be in a very high level, meaning you could be even a Rebbe, that by you it shines a total revelation of godliness. You're not even, you have good physically, you have good spiritually, and you're seeing the Beis HaMikdash. You see literally the level of godliness everywhere you go because it's inside of you, the level of the Beis HaMikdash, like Shimon Bar Yochai, as he says in the footnote, that by the Rashbi, the Beis HaMikdash was never destroyed. Like when you went around him in his court, you weren't having that experience. So even if you'll be such an individual, nevertheless, from the fact that in the whole world that is not shining, it's only shining by a certain individual, it's a must, that it must be that even the revelation that happens by the highest, most holiest person in the world, it must be a limited revelation. Why? Because if the real infinite light of Hashem was shining, then it wouldn't be limited to be only shining in a Rebbe and not in a simple Chinaman. Right? It would be everywhere in the world. So even if you personally don't even have it good begashmis, you have it good beruchnis, and you're seeing mamash God everywhere you go, you're still crushed. Because some person in a pushed off corner of the world is not having that experience, which means that even the experience you're having is not the real one. Because if you're having the real one, it would be a completely unlimited experience of God, that everyone would equally be experiencing this. If there's one place, even some pushed off corner, where it does not shine the full revelation of God, it's because the revelation, even in where it does shine, is a Gilui Mugbal. It is a limited one, and therefore you're crushed, period, no matter who you are. Mama, she's talking about even if you're a Rebbe like Rebbe Shimon Bar Yochai, you're still pashik crushed from the fact that Mashiach is not here and we don't have the full Geula. We should have Basuras Tovas and the full Geula.
When they wake up and cry over the